Welcome to the Irish NFL show. We are live tonight, and of course, we're live in real life in just a couple of weeks' time. That's August 21st. For those of you who haven't heard, that's Buskers on the Ball Temple Bar in Dublin. We'll have our special guest, Phoebe Schechter, in attendance, of Sky Sports NFL analysis team fame, and also ex of the Buffalo Bills, as we know. Of course, tickets are still available through Eventbrite. You can find the details through all our social channels, and we'd love to see you there. Before all that, on this, believe it or not, the first day of Celtic autumn, can you believe? I know it feels like it's been autumn since July, rainiest July on record, so actually have been enjoying watching the footage from training camps, which are in much sunnier climes than we get to enjoy ourselves. But we've lots to discuss tonight. We're going to talk injuries, host of big names taking hard knocks in training camp. The running back market obviously feels like Wall Street after Black Wednesday at the moment. We're going to look at which big name backs are still available, and there's lots of them out there, and also where they potentially might land. Justin Herbert, who, unlike the members of the running backs union, actually got paid. We look at that contract and we look at the ramifications for the QB market. But we're going to start with the man who made the offseason a much more entertaining place, I have to say. Slightly less classy, but Sean Payton, Brian, decided to fire shots at Nathaniel Hackett. This kind of reminded me slightly of, remember the Starsky and Hutch movie with Owen Wilson and Ben Stiller? When Ben Stiller says to the dead guy at the dock, looks like you just punched your last ticket, amigo. And Owen Wilson goes, are you tough talking a corpse? Sean Payton decides to fire shots at poor Nathaniel Hackett, and people lose their mind.
Yeah, I certainly didn't see it coming. I was slightly surprised. Obviously, I was away at the time, so I was kind of picking in, I suppose, jumping in and out of the story throughout the course.
Nobody was blaming you, Brian.
No, but I did. I was.
You have your alibi.
I was taken back. I was taken back by the nature of the interview. I obviously haven't read the full thing. I had to obviously engage with Colin, because Colin was bringing me up to speed and everything that was going on. But again, I think for a team that he's now head coaching with the Broncos, you would think that he'd be, and I'm sure he is 100% fully focused on the road and what's involved in bringing the Broncos back to former glories after a really difficult season. And I don't think we need to be giving, be honest, Aaron Rodgers and the Jets any more motivation than what they have at the moment, because it's very clear that they have been the most aggressive team this offseason, and they're very much in the sweepstakes to be challenging for the East, challenging to go to the Super Bowl. And I was surprised in a way that Rodgers hit back at him, to be honest, because I think Aaron Rodgers doesn't need to be going down that road. I think maybe he's trying to show a bit of leadership qualities that he's potentially been lacking over the course of the last 5 or 6 years in Green Bay, and people challenge him as a leader. Maybe he's trying to show his teammates that he is a true leader for the Broncos. I wish he didn't run it back, to be honest. And I said that to Colin. I wish I do believe he stood by what he said. I still believe he means it. And I feel maybe someone internally within the organization has had a word and said we need to scale back on this, and we're going to have to put out some kind of statement or apology. But I would have preferred if he didn't. I think it would have made things juicier for the season. And ironically enough, when we spoke about the Jets' difficult start to the season, they play the Bills and they play the Cowboys and then they have the Patriots. And then with Chiefs on Thursday night, I nearly know the Jets' schedule better than the Giants' schedule. But week 5 now has become a really juicy game, because that was never really one that we floated as a game which will have all the talk. But now already there's people discussing that game. And Hackett today came out and said his piece at his press conference. So everybody seems to be saying their piece now. And Sean Payton's probably the one who won't be saying any more about it in the immediate future. But certainly a story that I didn't see coming, and I'll be very interested to see what Colin's take is on it, obviously from a Broncos perspective, and what the Broncos media aspect is thinking about it.
And you mentioned, Brian, before Colin chips in, and I know he's plenty to say here, what Aaron Rodgers had to say, and we can take a quick listen to a clip of Aaron talking after that speech by Payton.
Just have it here, jump it up, and
haven't heard it yet. Here's what Aaron Rodgers said. I love it.
It made me feel bad that someone who's accomplished a lot in the league is that insecure that they have to take another man down to set themselves up for some sort of easy fall if it doesn't go well for that team this year. Thought it was way out of line and inappropriate, and I think he needs to keep my coach's names out of his mouth.
Oh, that part.
Colin, before you defend the honor of poor old Nathaniel Hackett, your former coach, who is this guy and what's he done with Aaron Rodgers? He takes a pay cut, which he never did in Green Bay. I'm sure there's a lot of Packers fans who are like, if you'd done that 2 seasons ago, we could have held on to Devontae Adams. Thanks very much. And now he's out defending coaches rather than throwing them under the bus.
Yeah, I mean, well, where to start with all of it? I mean, this is the interesting thing, I suppose, is that this has so much history because the Broncos tried to get Aaron Rodgers a couple of years ago, and there was all the talk about that on, draft night, and Mark Schlereth had the story, and then it didn't happen, and then they went all out in terms of their pursuit of him. I mean, you would be hard pressed to find in a Mills and Boone romance novel, the sort of courtship that the Broncos engaged in to get Aaron Rodgers to come over last year, and then that didn't happen. And so, I mean, look, I think for Sean Payton, it was essentially like he saw Hackett, I think, and everyone else's collateral damage. And this was about, him making a statement and trying to rebuild Russell Wilson because he is lumbered with him and that contract. But I would agree with what Brian said. I think walking it back was the worst thing that he could possibly have done. Now, Conor, you're kind of the expert in crisis management, but to me, nothing is gained from it. Those comments are out there. They're not going away. Everybody knows. And rowing back on it hasn't stopped Rodgers' comments, hasn't stopped Hackett's comments. Hackett said he broke the coaching code today. And for me, he's had a word in the year, right? Greg Penner undoubtedly has come down and said, hey, you need to do this. But ultimately, can anyone say, was what he said inaccurate in any way? Now, maybe you don't say it, but ultimately, like, I hear all the time about like, oh, kids these days and students, and there are no repercussions. No repercussions for people in earning millions and millions. If you get even the mildest criticism, people rush to defend you and say, oh, he didn't mean that. So the Broncos have been a joke franchise for the best part of, over half a decade now. And somebody needed to step forward rather than the kind of mealy-mouthed pieces that you get around next year. It was refreshing. And I think most people around the league found it refreshing to actually hear a coach, because we're so used to sports speak and we're so used to massaging everything and everything is great, especially this time of the year when we joked about it on this show previously. Everyone's in the best shape of their life. The rookies are absolutely fantastic. The vets are going to be better than ever. To me, what Sean Payton said felt very much akin to the Alex Ferguson of old and his infamous quip about Newcastle being a wee club in the Northeast. I think if Sean Payton had won a ring, and Conor, you and I did about the sliding doors or what if moments, if that the Nola no call hadn't happened and Sean Payton had an extra ring on the finger, I think he would have been allowed maybe make that. But the fact that ring is over a decade old, I think it was much easier for Greg Penner to tap him on the shoulder and say, hey, Sean, you're going to calm that one down and look to douse the fires. But ultimately, as we're seeing, it's still being discussed, and it's still being discussed today. So what ultimately did rowing back on it achieve? Brian?
Colin, you left one out there on all the various different things at this time of year where the quarterback is light years ahead of his. You left that one out. Buzz Lightyear. Trey Lance is light years ahead of where he was this time last year. Colin says Sir Alex Ferguson. I was going to actually suggest Roy Keane when he did that famous interview after the Middlesbrough away game, which was never aired on MUTV. I don't think anything he ever said in that particular interview was incorrect or inaccurate. It was more a manner of how he did it, and that's probably it's a very different situation. I think it's in there. I don't disagree with anything Sean Payton has said, but unfortunately, he's been out of the game he hasn't been out of the game for that long. But I would have thought he would have been a little bit more clued in not to go down that road, because he's only going to antagonize other players and teams who don't need to be even more motivated than they already are going into the season.
Ironically, even Nathaniel Hackett didn't disagree with him. Like, he may not have said the comments were classy. He said it violates the coach's code, but he owned everything that went in Denver. In fairness to him, he was quite classy about it. this is very on brand for Sean Payton, right? This is what he does, and this is who he is. I don't know if you're in Broncos country, you want to let Sean Payton be Sean Payton. You might as well dance with the one that brung you. That's who he is. You don't want to be reining him in or walking him back. It actually probably, I think to your point, Colin, makes him look a bit weak in front of the players. Like, either double down and go for it, or why did you hire Sean Payton in the first place if you don't want stuff like this to happen? This is who he is. Before we move off the Broncos, we might as well talk about the on-field issues. Again, the curse of the Broncos wide receiver room column strikes once more. We've got, Tim Patrick out for the season now. Second year in a row that the Broncos have had a season-ending injury in the wide receiver room in the offseason.
Yeah, and you'd have to really feel for a guy like Tim Patrick. He finally kind of got paid. This is a guy who bounced around the league a little bit, then found a home in Denver, put the effort in, kind of made himself into a good wide receiver, got paid, and has now gone down with 2 season-ending injuries, both kind of freak injuries, an ACL last year and then the Achilles this year. But this has been the way with the Broncos over the past few years. Cortland Sutton went down in 2020. You had Tim Patrick, you had KJ Hamler. So you have seen players go down like in day 1 or day 2 of camp. And KJ Hamler has also had to take time out of the game for a heart condition. And he hopes to be back, I think, October, potentially. And obviously you wish both of these guys well. But it is, a really horrible time of the year. And it's the Broncos this week. I remember, if you go back to the Ravens a couple of years ago, and they lost 3 running backs in training camp. So it's the worst possible time, to get an injury, and particularly when it's somebody like Tim Patrick and it's 2 years in a row. I hope he can come back, but you would have to say that your ACL in one leg and then the Achilles in the other, missing 2 years due to injury, it makes it very, very difficult. I hope he can be, because I do think he is talented. But I think it also highlights the Broncos probably got lucky in that they didn't trade Jerry Jeudy. A lot of talk in the lead up to the draft that they may look to trade Jeudy. That didn't happen. And the thing is, I suppose, like, just if you remove the human side of things and the awfulness of the injury, the Broncos do have cover, because they have Mims, they drafted Mims, and they brought in Callaway, who Sean Payton knows. And you still have Jerry Jeudy, you still have Cortland Sutton, and you have a couple of tight ends who are kind of better, almost better as pass catchers. Now, Sean Payton has brought in blocking tight ends, but I think the Broncos are probably okay, but they're going to have to do different things, because nobody quite has the skill set that Tim Patrick does on that roster.
Do you think Sean Payton is right that they're still a playoff team?
That was probably the most interesting thing that he said, right? And that got lost in the Hackett comments. Like, he said that he's going to be very annoyed if they're not a playoff team. So that's the marker that's laid down. That is serious business in an AFC West that still has Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, and you look around the rest of the AFC conference, and you're tall. I think to be an AFC playoff team this season, you could be talking 11 wins. That's a tall order.
Yeah, you'd almost say he's put a target on their back, or even a bounty on their heads. Perish the thought.
There was a lot of Jets players who kind of did suggest that on social media, going back around Bounty Gate. I just want to make a quick point on Tim Patrick, maybe more so for Russell Wilson, because when Russell Wilson was brought in last year, he would have thought to himself, I'm going to have Cortland Sutton, I'm going to have Tim Patrick. He now goes into his second season now as quarterback, and he's still yet to throw a ball to Tim Patrick. And on Jerry Jeudy, like Colin has said, they didn't trade him, but I genuinely believe in Colin. My challenge is that if the right offer had came in on trade deadline last year, and even this offseason, I believe he would have been traded, and that kind of heaps more pressure on Jerry Jeudy, who it's fair to say has not kind of lived up to the hype when he was drafted. I know him and Rogers was kind of neck and neck with her who would go, and ironically they both ended up in the West. One is out of the league now, But I think that might put more pressure on Judy this year to perform. And towards the back end of last season, he looked like he was finding his feet and he was playing well, albeit there weren't like games in which the Broncos were involved in the sense of trying to make a playoff push, but he did seem to play well. I wonder, will he be able to hit the ground running at the start of the season? And maybe Cortland Sutton will be the main man. But to lose Tim Patrick 2 years in a row, and for Russell Wilson not to have the speedster, the guy that can, I know Jerry Judy can take the top off defense, but so can Tim Patrick. And for me, it's a huge loss already to an offense that's going to be under greater pressure, because if they don't hit the ground running, you just know the pressure will build on Russell Wilson, and it won't be 5 or 6 weeks before Sean Payton is fielding questions on Russell Wilson and stuff.
Yeah, and as you said, Brian, in that context, lucky that they didn't ship Jerry Judy. A player who is on the market, though, is Jonathan Taylor, Indianapolis Colts running back. And they're also dealing with some injuries of their own within that running back room, because Zach Moss has gone down with a broken arm. Jim Irsay and Jonathan Taylor, clearly no love lost between them. Is there a market for Jonathan Taylor at this point, though?
I believe so. I believe there's some column, interesting about column things, but there was a lot of talk today that there's a lot of teams they are fielding calls for him. Be interesting to see what Chris Ballard what thinks of the situation rather than the owner. But like I watched a bit of Good Morning Football yesterday, and they were saying that Jim Irsay seems to think he's the Jerry Jones of the league, and whilst the Cowboys haven't won a Super Bowl for 30 odd years, they still have fielded very good teams, and he's invested in the right manner and got the team competitive. And certainly, like if it wasn't for certain games, they might have had an opportunity to go to Super Bowl. The Colts, with the exception of maybe a couple of years, they haven't done a lot. But this owner seems to be living in a different parallel universe in terms of other owners. The way he's behaving, the way he acts upon news, he's consistently getting out there. We spoke a couple of weeks ago when we did our AFC South off-season review, and we said one of the key things for the Colts this year will be for the owner to stay out of the head coach's way and let him get on with it and let him develop Richardson and have a fine running back like Taylor playing in the background. It doesn't help when your owner is challenging agents on social media and so on, and he just keeps going and going and going. Taylor, I think there is a value, and I think they potentially will get the right offer. Whether they will let him go, I'm not entirely sure.
What do you reckon, Colm? You're wondering as well with Jonathan Taylor. Brian, I know, brought up the agent, but if you wanted out of there, you might have moved a little bit earlier in the off-season than now, when very few teams have salary cap, and a lot of people have pretty much settled on who their running backs are going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can see the comment there from Owen in terms of, was he badly advised? I suppose maybe some of it was kind of, we've had a number of weeks now of kind of situations with running backs, right? And you obviously had the Saquon situation. The Giants managed to get a 1-year deal done, which probably allows, and Brian may see it as different, it's good for everyone to an extent, right? Saquon gets to save face a little bit because he's not playing on the tag, and the week previously he had been angry. The quote that was the quote that was used. Obviously, you've got the situation with Josh Jacobs, got Austin Eckler going out publicly, and so there's a feeling amongst running backs that they are being undervalued and underappreciated, and you can understand that, given they are the workhorses of the league, and their shelf life is so short. I mean, the kind of joke around the league has always been NFL is not for long, and it's running backs in particular who take so much. And kind of, we discussed this. That's what I was kind of happy with the NIL money, that you'll see running backs get some pay in college, because they just take so much punishment. So I think some of Jonathan Taylor's I suppose annoyance is coming and stemming from the running back committee. And it's very difficult, because ultimately the CBA is there and the owners are the owners, and we have seen how the owners have acted in the past in terms of their ability to close ranks, and when they make a decision, and so it's really difficult to see a situation where running backs get what they are looking for. And they're all going to respond in different ways. So you've had annoyance from some. So Travis Etienne get on the podium the other day and say, look, the days of getting paid if you're only a downhill runner are gone. You've got to diversify. You've got to look at other things and bring that to your bow. For Jonathan Taylor, it's unfortunate that it's coming off of last year as well, because it was, if this was coming off, his stock this time last year was higher than almost any running, like even higher than probably Derrick Henry's has ever been. Like, people really expected, because he seemed so fresh, that he was going to have an absolute monster year last year. It didn't happen, but this is
the rock on which many a fantasy league team perished.
Oh,
I think 1,800 yards, 18 touchdowns. Everyone was eyeing him.
He truly, it was the sirens calling you onto the rocks. But again, said it on the show before, billionaires get to do what billionaires get to do, and there aren't consequences. Just talked about that, I suppose, in relation to Sean Payton. Jim Irsay can come out, he can say what he wants, he can meddle in the team in whatever, but he still gets to own the team. Other than their record, that's kind of it. So what he decides ultimately will be what happens.
Brian, at a human level, obviously you can't but sympathize with running backs. You have an average 3-year career. On average, that means you're not even going to get off your rookie contract before you get chewed up and spat out. The days of guys getting a big second contract seem to be gone, unless you're Christian McCaffrey, and as Colm says, you've diversified. It is what it is for running backs, though, under the CBA until 2030, and that's not a great place to be.
Yeah, and I think it's a case of so many running backs, because you saw last week they were having this, running backs only committee meeting, and all the players were going to galvanize by having this, and some of them were quite outspoken from the comments and the feedback coming out of that meeting. And it just seems to have all come together at the same time. I was going to jump into the Barkley, because we haven't discussed it, and it happened last week. Colin's made a very good point about Barkley running it back to a certain extent and getting a little bit of additional money by securing this 1-year contract. Like, I think ultimately he seems like the kind of player who doesn't want to be holding out. He wants to be involved. He wants to be with the team. And I think he was the one who saved face last week. His agent badly managed the situation. He swapped agents during the offseason to try resolve the situation. I mean, he had 3 offers from the Giants. That's come out publicly. It's well documented. He had an offer in November, an offer in the end of the season, and an additional offer in the lead up to the deadline. And he still couldn't get the deal done. I mean, at some stage, these guys I would imagine, have to recognize, are they better off securing the money now as opposed to taking another gamble and being in the years down the line where the potential to get another injury? You just joked about it, but it's so true. This time last year, Jonathan Taylor was being put up there, not necessarily fancy football related, but I remember when we did our season preview show, former colleague on the show Mark suggested he would be the offensive player of the year. It didn't materialize because of injuries. Who's to say it won't be one of these running backs come this time 12 months, and Austin Eckler, Derrick Henry, Saquon, and maybe they should, maybe they need to take the step back and recognize, unfortunately, this is the landing position in which they have in the league, which makes them so good at running backs. But we only saw in the Super Bowl a 7th round pick leading the Chiefs to a Super Bowl. So there's a few more coming around the corner as well.
And that's it. Yeah, you got Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs drafted high because you're better off investing early, getting a guy in the draft. You get your 4 years out of him, you tag him for a year, and then you move on. And it's rinse and repeat. That seems to be what most teams are doing, because the value you can add in the draft at running back exceeds the marginal gains you're getting in pretty much every other position. Like it pay you. It took general managers a long time to learn this, and a lot of guys getting paid and never justifying the second contract before the penny finally dropped with them. And arguably, although the running backs union will never say this, a lot of them were overpaid relative to the production for many years, and now unfortunately they've regressed to the mean. But I suppose part of the issue here is, Colm, and you mentioned the NIL money. It's the fact that you're locked into playing a couple of years in college in the draft at a heavily attritional position. Guys come into the NFL and they're half broken already.
Yeah, I mean that is it, especially the way some colleges utilize the players. I mean, some of these guys are, they're just hand the ball off, and you get plenty of laurels, but that's all you got in college up to now, right? So this is why I think the NIL money is so important. And Connor, we've touched on this, and Brian, we touched on this when we were chatting with Neil Reynolds, but I just wonder, with the NIL money, and particularly with certain position groups in particular, can we see players kind of retire a little bit earlier than they did previously. So we see running backs tend to exit maybe after their first contract, or maybe some of them get that second contract. But I think that is something to keep an eye on, because the days of us looking and kind of going, my goodness, Barry Sanders retired early. I think there could be quite the litany of guys who ultimately follow that path.
Brian, you wanted to make a final point on this?
Yeah, like the benchmark obviously is the Christian McCaffrey contract that was handed out. And this is the point I was going to make with the 49ers. I was reading a very interesting article last week in which Kyle Shanahan has had 7 leading running backs year on year since he went there as the head coach. No player has returned and been the leading rusher the following year. He's had 7 different guys. So they've always gone with the versatile side of things in terms of the running back aspect, and he doesn't necessarily focus his offense around predominant running backs. But yeah, they are the ones who kind of, you could say the 49ers are going to cause this by giving that particular contract to McCaffrey last year of 60 million plus. Like, you could argue, is he worth it? Yeah, he had a great season with the 49ers, but he was also a player with a lot of risk coming off injuries. But ultimately, the contract that they've given him is the one that's been served up for the likes of Barkley and other running backs that are looking at it going, if Christian McCaffrey's valued at that, we should be obviously recognised that, but that's not the case. And of all head coaches who aren't generally focused on running backs to give the contract, John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan are the one that do it.
Before we wrap on running backs, a bit of injury news as well from the Seahawks camp. Kenneth Walker dinged, Zach Charbonnet dinged, just as well. They got what arguably looks like the strongest wide receiver room in the league, because they're going to have to be throwing the ball a lot more if they're that banged up in the backfield.
Yeah, and this is sorry, I'm just like pays into the significance of what we're talking about. Like, you're seeing running backs getting so many injuries at so many crucial times to have 2 of their leading running backs and a rookie who's with huge expectations to be already injured after a week or so. Camp just kind of goes to the point of why you're going to continue paying running backs when the large amounts of them are going to pick up injuries week in, week out of the season.
Yeah, and there are injuries that could linger as well. But I suppose what it could mean is, we get to see possibly early on, like if the Seahawks are able to bring guys in, who have kind of been out there in free agents or undrafted free agents, rookies coming in, and they still do well, then that might undermine what running backs are looking for even further. On the contrary, if Kenneth Walker is missing and the Seahawks get off to a bad start when, arguably they looked on paper at least have a better roster than last year, that might strengthen the running backs committee's arguments that they should be getting more money.
One guy who's definitely going to get paid is Joe Burrow, but he's carrying an injury of his own at the moment, which has led to the Bengals signing quarterback Reed Sinnett, most recently of the San Antonio Brahmas of the XFL, another nice little feeder league for the NFL to devour the crumbs from. They're saying it's a calf strain. They're saying it's not too bad. The video didn't make it look great, but you can over-index on these things. I guess you can go either way, Brian. It's not always as bad as it looks.
No, but Connor's touched on lingering injuries for running backs. This is a lingering injury for the quarterback. It'd be interesting to see. Like, they haven't, once they said he's going to be out for a few weeks, they haven't really given us a definitive timeline for when he's going to be back. He certainly won't be playing any preseason games, but then he wouldn't have anyway. Maybe he would have taken a couple of snaps on the opening drive. But I think there's I'm not going to say there's a bigger story at play here, but it'd be interesting to see how this navigates. Like, the Bengals, difficult start to the season with the Browns. You'd expect them to be in cotton wool now, give or take, and obviously going through the rehab to be ready. But certainly one to keep an eye on. But they're playing it down, but I'm not entirely sure it's a lack of a serious injury as maybe they're suggesting.
How long do you hold him back for at the start of the season then to make sure he's ready, or can you afford to rest him at all? If he's half ready, does he have to go?
It's difficult given the division that they are in, and it's tough. I mean, that one in particular, we know those teams don't like each other, but to me, I would hold it back as long as you possibly can. I mean, this is your franchise. The Bengals have seen what life without Joe Burrow looks like, and it's not good. It wasn't good before he arrived, and it wasn't good obviously when he had the serious knee injury previously. So I would be looking to get by as much as they possibly can, and to hold him out until it's properly healed, because the last thing in the world you want is you rush him back and he's back in week 1, and week 2 all of a sudden he aggravates the injury, and now it's a much more serious piece, and the risk of re-aggravation is higher and at every occurrence. So, but that's easy for me to say sitting here in Dublin. Like, if you're a head coach and you're Zach Taylor, and the expectation is, you've to win and win now, and we all know that it is a what have you done for me lately league. There'll be pressure to play him almost immediately.
Yeah, I see the injury looks like it may have cost us an opportunity to see him on the second season of quarterback as well. The Netflix show, it looks like he's going to pull out of that, unfortunately.
Trevor Siemian is the backup. Connor, like, with all due respect, week 1 in Cleveland, do you see a scenario where Trevor Siemian is good enough to lead them to victory? I know.
Let's see what Reid Sinnott does, Brian. Let's see what Reid Sinnott does.
It's an interesting one, because you have to wonder who would like. We've seen Trevor Siemian play reasonably strong games. We saw him with the Saints a couple of years back. He's able to manage a game here and there. But if you were to have him consistently playing over the course of 2 to 3 weeks, it's not going to end well. I would challenge that he would be in a position to beat the Browns in week 1. I think Joe Burrow inevitably will have to play.
And look, apart from everything else, he's got pressure on himself, because he's still looking for that extension, which he hasn't got, which he almost certainly will. But he's got to play to make sure that he gets what we now must call Justin Herbert money after Justin Herbert's contract during the week. Justin Herbert got paid and has now set the benchmark for quarterbacks, and that's roundabout what Burrow's going to be looking for, I guess.
Yeah, and rightly so, because again, Burrow has shown an ability to go in and in the toughest of moments to get wins. Like, you go back to the game against the Titans, 9 sacks, running for his life the whole time, they get the win. You go into Arrowhead, you're down, you look dead and buried, and you get up off the canvas. That's how important he is to them, and so he will get paid. But you imagine, he's not under pressure to get the deal done as such, right? He wants to, and his agent are what's in it for them to sign early. Like, they know the Bengals want to. Let's say, right, the Bengals decided, we're not going to get done. How many other franchises would queue up? This would make the Peyton Manning sweepstakes seem quaint if Joe Burrow was to come onto the market. So he knows that it's going to happen. But look, when it comes to Herbert, the Chargers, in fairness, talk about the Spanos not having the money of some of the teams around the league, and that is the case. But they aren't afraid to cough up. And again, they've kind of looked to front load that contract. I think about 100 million of it is in year 1. So that is what they are looking to ensure that on the back end of it, they'll be still able to put talent around him. And they have been able to draft a lot of good young pieces. Now, they are going to have guys, probably the last year of Austin Eckler, with the Chargers. They're going to have to replace at least Keenan Allen, if not Keenan and Mike Williams next offseason. So lots of different pieces. But Herbert has been absolutely sensational. And my big question mark was always last year under Lombardi, or in the last couple of years, he didn't see him push the ball down the field. He has very kind of publicly said in the past couple of weeks he wants to push the ball down the field. If I was a Chargers fan, that would be music to my ears.
Brian, he said something else which is kind of interesting. After the contract was concluded on Wednesday, he said the new contract allows him to, quote, play fearless. Like, if he wasn't playing fearless before, I can't wait to see what he's going to do this season.
Yeah, we had a great interview with Zion Johnson earlier in the offseason. He spoke so highly of the player himself. What we see on the field is not necessarily what we see off the field, but he's a real motivator. He's a real kind of gathering of men. He doesn't come across as that type of quarterback. He comes across a very kind of quiet kind of demeanor about the guy. But by all accounts, that's not the case. I love the way Colin was talking about the contract. I'm going to be starting calling this contract. He's in the Daniel Jones contract world now, which is great to see. Great to see two quality quarterbacks getting well paid this offseason. But no, like even the social media aspect at which the Chargers, they're continuously pushing out the narrative of all the explosive plays in which he's having in the training camp. But as Colin always says, these videos we see where people are going off their mind over great catches and great shows in the offseason pays into little significance come week one when they're going to be facing a team like the Dolphins with a really tough defense. But yeah, like I'd imagine he does a bit of relief on his side. Like Colin has touched on Joe Burrow, he's correct, especially now. Like Joe Burrow is under no pressure to get this contract signed. Where there was always kind of a feeling that Herbert was very keen to get it done. So I'm sure the fearless thing is interesting. So he's going to be playing with all bells and whistles on the Kellen Moore's offense. I'm very keen to see how Kellen Moore handles Justin Herbert because everybody believes he's going to come in, and he wasn't the problem in Dallas. He's going to be the answer in LA with the Chargers. I'm not entirely sure on that side of things, but I've been on the Kellen Moore issue train for quite some time.
I'm on that Kellen Moore bandwagon, I have to say. I do think he's going to deliver. I think he's got extra motivation. He certainly wasn't the problem there. Like, we all know who the problem was. But speaking of one of Kellen Moore's former players, Zeke Elliott visiting the Patriots, this offseason has been the story of the running backs feeling disenfranchised and pretty much all of them getting to visit New England at some point. I don't know whether Bill Belichick is running a counseling service for disenchanted running backs, but they haven't yet signed one. Will Zeke be the guy, or is this just a bargaining ploy, Colin, do you think?
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, you heard Jerry again this week. He just does not seem to be able to let this go. I mean, the man who cannot move on. And, you know, there's still an opportunity for Zeke to come in here, and Zeke can still do it. If the Cowboys are to have any success, they need to find a way to distract Jerry Jones. You know, just find a shiny thing that you can dangle over here and take Jerry's attention, because the last thing in the world they need is Zeke coming back in. It was been the law of diminishing returns with Zeke. I think Zeke in a different system, and when he's not the main back, yeah, I mean, Zeke can absolutely still contribute. But the problem is that Jerry was so obsessed. I mean, this time last year, right? And it was even close to the season. Remember, Jerry said, you know, as Zeke goes, we go. I mean, are you, what kind of a lunatic are you? I mean, at that point, somebody should be sitting down and saying, no, Jerry, that's not how the NFL works anymore. We are, you know, it's not 1993, it's 2023. So I would say for me, Zeke should go anywhere else rather than back to the Cowboys.
Do you think New England would be a good spot for him, Brian?
I think it makes sense. I think he would go in there and he would support Stevenson, who's the lead back there. He would, like, they lost one of their former running backs who's gone to Buffalo, and he's, you know, I was quite surprised that he left the Patriots. I think I think we recognise at this stage Zeke as Compton. He's not the lead back. Whoever team he goes into in the right situation will support a running back. And we've seen the Patriots. I think we're going to come on this, but we've seen the Patriots also have Dalvin Cook in, you know, for potential. You know, in case I would have thought Dalvin Cook would have been more the player that would really suit the Patriots. But I think he's looking to be kind of a lead back, where Zeke Elliott will recognise, I think, at this stage, going into the right scheme with a team like the Patriots. And then go through, what's the expectation, no matter who takes in Zeke? They're not expecting him to come in and hit the ground running in terms of being a leading back, taking majority of the snaps in the backfield. He'll be there to support him on short yardage, third down plays, and on the goal line for touchdowns and in the red zone. That would be my expectation. I think it's a good fit, but I'm not entirely sure it's going to happen. I think if it was going to happen, why wouldn't it happen last weekend? Like, he's not going to be looking for astronomical money, and he's walked out there. And when you see the various different social media outlets in terms of the NFL world saying they're going to keep in contact with one another, to me that sounds like, yeah, thanks but no thanks. And, you know, you had dinner with Mac Jones, by all accounts he was pictured having dinner, but yet there's no deal. To me it sounds like he's trying to find a way to build up some leverage to galvanise the Cowboys and to give them another opportunity.
Colin, as Brian mentioned, Dalvin Cook, probably the only running back that we haven't had a chance to discuss yet. Brian mentioned them briefly there. If you're to pick between Dalvin and Zeke, I'm guessing you'd like Dalvin Cook in New England out of those two options. But it does sound, as Brian was saying, like he wants to be the guy wherever he goes. He doesn't want to be the supporting actor.
No, but I suppose that's, in some ways, that's not a bad thing. I mean, he likes to post that tweet of, the expensive play, as he keeps referring to it, where he broke off last year and went for, I think, in around 70 odd yards. But look, this is a really strange time of the year, because you've got players and their agents trying to, leverage what they have, and you've got teams trying to leverage themselves. And I know, Brian, you did had an interesting interview earlier today in which the feeling out there amongst certainly some of the Jets media is that Dalvin Cook wants to go to Miami, and that he's essentially leveraging the Jets' interest in him and bringing him in to try to get Miami to pony up the cash. So that's an interesting one. I think that podcast will be available later in the week, and people will get the opportunity to hear that. But that's coming from Jets media. Is that accurate? We have no way of knowing, but that's the feeling on the ground. But what I would say to anyone, right, watching this or just interested in sports writ large, and it's a piece of advice that I heard from Richard Kurt, who's a journalist who now lives it up on the French Riviera, drinking wine and enjoying semi-retirement. But Kurt said, never believe anything anyone in sport says publicly, be it an owner, be it a coach, be it an agent, be it a manager, because it all comes with an agenda. They're all trying to sell you something. They're trying to spin something. They're trying to leverage themselves into the best possible position. So everything you see said, recognize that there is something behind that. There are strings, and there is a puppet master. So take everything with a grain of salt and recognize that, just because a player says X, or a coach says X, or a general manager says, yeah, he's great, we really value him, doesn't mean they're going to pony up the cash.
It does mean we're going to tear it apart in minute detail, though. Like, where would we be without those sensational pronouncements?
Sorry, I just want to make a quick point, and we saw Fred's point there, and he's asking the question which you've kind of addressed on Zeke, but there's been so many storylines around McCarthy and how he's going to structure this offense this year, very different to the Kellen Moore, and he's not going to be as aggressive and attack-minded in terms of allowing Dak to go down the field. He's going to be a bit more methodical, run-centric offense. Tony Pollard is coming off a serious injury. He's obviously on the tag, and he didn't really challenge the team too much because I think he recognised he's coming off a serious injury, and he's probably in a better position to have a good season now and obviously look for the contract next year. But we've spoken about it earlier in the show, like the likes of Jonathan Taylor coming off serious injuries. How confident are the Cowboys that he's going to come back and be the stellar running back in which they'll expect him to be? Because the good thing for Tony Pollard over the course of the last 3 years was the fact that he had Zeke there, that he was allowed to be kind of dual support act. You would think that McCarthy would be keen to get the likes of Zeke or some other running back in if he's going to go with a run-orientated offense. And I know they brought in Vaughn in the 4th round. I think his father, we saw all the coverage around his father's on the coaching staff there. That's a gamble. You're going to try to get a 4th run, and they're talking him up in the camp to saying he's hitting the ground running, but a 4th round running back, I know we've seen it in the past, but again, it's a gamble. So I would have thought was Jerry Jones is really wanting him back. Does it not make sense for him to go back? He recognized the situation. He knows the coaching staff. Would it be much more fruitful to have him around as opposed to taking a gamble on another running back coming in? Because I imagine at some stage the Cowboys will have to find a backup to Tony Pollard, who has played in the league and has shown he can do it in the league.
Brian, I know you weren't here with us for the sliding doors moments last week because you were enjoying your own well-earned break. But as you return just in time for the All-Ireland, we might give you a sliding doors moment of a different hue. With all due apologies to listeners, particularly from Kerry. What was your sliding doors moment from Croke Park from the All-Ireland over the weekend?
Oh, can I not play it now? I could play it if you wish.
You have the power.
I have the power, do I? Okay. I think this might have been the sliding doors moment when a team was up by 3 points in the game. Yeah, just bear with me a second.
Oh, and there's a mistake. Here's Collie Pascal. Look at Paddy Small beside him. Small is through. Paddy Small! Goal! It's deflected into the back of the net. Dublin get their goal into Hill 16. The sides are level in the 46th minute. Paddy Small Here we go, Dara. We've been waiting for it to blow into life. It was a mistake. Gavin Wycott turned over. Colin Basquel did brilliant. Paul Murphy did his absolute best to block it. Drilled it into the ground. If anything, it took it past Shane Ryan even better. Spun high into the net. Great goal from Dublin. It's really game on now.
The kick heard around the world from your world champion Dublin footballers.
I imagine I'll speak on behalf of the 31 other counties and just say, yes, congratulations, Dublin.
From the bottom of your heart,
at
Colin,
that
that meant a lot.
At that stage of the game, I know we're going off kilter because we're predominantly NFL related here, but at that stage of the game, bearing in mind how Kerry gave the goal away, I felt Kerry were actually controlling the game at that stage of the second half. They were 3 points up. I was getting a little bit concerned, but the goal I don't know once Kerry rallied after that. I think, and obviously the turning point Dublin have players that they can bring off the pitch. But anyway, there you go.
Rallied sensationally, and to be fair, let's give a shout out to the man Paddy Clifford, massive NFL fan, big Steelers fan. Met him at the Steelers launch, an absolute gent. Had a monster game. Ended up on the losing side. Obviously not, I would imagine, the last time we're going to see Paddy Clifford taken to the field in an All-Ireland final, and I'm sure happier days ahead for him, and who knows, maybe for his Steelers this season as well.
Indeed, and I think probably if there are people watching or listening who haven't checked out that kind of what if moment, the podcast that we did, would definitely encourage them to do so. It was a lot of fun kind of going through, and it was everything from more recent moments to way back in the 70s, discussing some of everything from the Immaculate Reception to Wide Right, to obviously Beast Mode, and imagining what if only Peyton had Eli's attitude in the playoffs, how many rings would he have?
That podcast we just did last week was fantastic. Genuinely, I really enjoyed it. And for every NFL fan out there who hasn't listened to it, they should take time out to listen to that show, because it covers your Colin has touched on it. It covers every year, no matter what age category you're in. There'll be a story of some sort in there. And it's strange because when you listen back, you kind of go, oh yeah, I remember that situation, and the enormity of the trades such as Herschel Walker, Show Me Age and stuff. But and then obviously various different ones in the Marshawn Lynch, and obviously I took great joy in listening to the Eli Manning conversation as well. But no, really one of the best, and it was great to see a great reaction on social media. There was some people who said it was one of the best ones they've listened to in quite some time. So I must congratulate the both of you on that one.
Great to hear, and very magnanimous, Brian. And we missed you. We would have loved to get your what if, and I hope we did justice to the Big Blue Wrecking Crew and to Lawrence Taylor in particular on his own what if moment. Before we wrap, we might throw out another what if, which is what if you didn't get a ticket for the live show coming up on August 21st. You will miss out on a great night of NFL talk. You'll miss out on an audience with Phoebe Schechter of Sky Sports, and you'll be sorry if you didn't go. Tickets still available on Eventbrite. Details on all our social channels. That's coming up on August 21st at Buskers on the Ball in Temple Bar.
And great to interact. It's always nice when we go live. I mean, the recorded stuff is certainly a lot of fun. It allows us to probably go into detail. And Connor, we got to discuss our kind of best ever NFL teams, which is another good episode. But getting to interact with people tonight and all the chat coming in, I really look forward to that on the night of the 21st as well. And for anyone listening, if you get the opportunity, please do rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to them. It makes a real difference. Or better yet, recommend the show to a friend. That is probably the easiest and best way to help us spread the word about the Irish NFL show.
Yeah, look, it's 3 weeks. Was it less than 3 weeks to the live show, and it just whets the appetite for a new NFL season. I'm really looking forward to the event itself, and the live shows are always the best. Like we did one in January during the playoffs, and it was a fantastic turnout. And it's, as Colin alluded to, it's always great to meet the people in person who support the show throughout the course of the season. And when we hit that week in particular, we're going to be well into preseason games. We're going to have the college game that weekend, and then we're only a couple of weeks away from the real action early September. Can't wait.
We better ramp up our own training camp. We need to get the ladders out and start hitting the tackle machines. We've wintered well, in fairness.
Yeah, and some great podcasts come out over the course of the week leading up to the Hall of Fame game. Colin alluded to, we had some Jeff's media aspects. today, which will go out later in the week. We have Browns tomorrow. So Browns Jets on Thursday night in the Hall of Fame game, leading into the preseason slate of games. And then I imagine we'll come back next week because the way things are going in the league, it's not, you're only an hour away from the next story. So looking forward to catching up and going through all the latest news with you guys next week as well.
Great stuff. I guess we'll leave it there and we'll wrap and we'll talk to you soon.